the Virginia special election results were overturned, just straight up overturned, meaning that they're going to return to the old map that the 10-1 Democrat gerrymander has failed after a 4-3 Virginia Supreme Court decision, overturning the result and Democratic choice of the voters after a back and forth tit-for-tat blow of exchanges between the Republican Party and Democratic Party across the country, with of course it being first shot off with the effort in Texas, as Donald Trump explicitly came out and said, we want a gerrymander, we're going to do it for partisan reasons, let's gain ourselves some votes without actually having to gain ourselves some votes. And that set off a series of chain reactions. Now, of course, if you are a Republican, you could say, well, what about New York before then? What about XYZ before then? A mid-decade redistricting effort is a totally different ballgame. No one could argue that gerrymandering did not exist in the United States, okay? Or that there isn't a certain amount of tomfoolery when it comes to our election systems. Just look at the LBJ special election in Texas in 1948, and you'll learn about the many brilliant ways in which our democracy can be twisted and turned by its nipples, right? So it's not that I believe that our democracy has never been twisted in a way that coerces a certain outcome. What I do think is that by breaking down the rules faster, by making it so, number one, not only are we reversing all of these independent redistricting commissions that many state activists and pro-democracy activists have fought for decades, by rolling those back at the same time that we change the standard from, well, we redistrict when the census comes out to we redistrict whenever it is politically feasible. This hypercharges our political divisions in this country, as well as disenfranchising people in Memphis, people in Louisiana, people who are having their community's character disregarded in favor of partisan declarations, where cities that would reasonably make one district are being split up into 3 districts, because by splitting it up into 3 districts, you can make sure a Republican wins in every single one of those seats, while if it was 1 district, a Democrat would likely win. By speeding up this process, not only does it disenfranchise these people, but it also creates an encouragement for partisanship, an encouragement for division, and lays the foundations for it. And what I mean by that is, in this country right now, if you were wanted to run where I am in Maryland, before, of course, the any attempt made to remove Andy Harris permanently from his position, you would have to acknowledge the character of the communities in some way. Maybe not as much as it should, but cities and towns will generally be grouped together. And so if you have a town that has a certain view on how the state should be run, that view can be showed in a unified manner. You're not just going to be slicing out the districts of a city that are going to be most supportive to you. And that means that you maintain the character of communities when creating voting districts. And so if a community is hurt by a policy implemented by a legislative official, by a legislator, you can go as a community, organize and see if you can remove that person from office, replace them with somebody else. But in a scenario where the city is cut in 3, the way you win elections is by winning primaries. The general election becomes performance art. It becomes the dance of democracy, not the function of democracy, where there's no chance that you're going to lose, because these areas that, even if you were to look at this city or that city, they might be overwhelmingly opposed to you. If you can choose your voters, then you can choose like the election outcome you want. You can choose to have to rely on voters that are going to want you to appeal to your base, but not appeal to the general population that actually makes up the character of these cities. Meaning that instead of, say, after let's say a housing problem or a housing crisis or a food crisis, having some sort of policy that is reminiscent of what the community would actually want, you're just going to appeal to whatever the base would want. Because ultimately, whether you win or lose a primary decides whether or not you have the office. As we just saw with the 5 Republicans pushed out of office after the Republican Party pushed millions upon millions of dollars into the state specifically to box them out because they would not do a mid-decade redistricting effort in order to just push out Democratic representation, push out representation for Indianans, and ultimately just get him the congressional outcome that he wants. Dylan, don't forget that if you're killed in the Avatar state, the cycle will be broken and the Avatar will cease to exist. Yeah, that's the one thing that I don't get about Avatar is when you see how many times the Avatar has gone into Avatar state, the idea that an Avatar has never died in Avatar state before, very hard to believe. Very hard to believe. I mean, you go into Avatar state when shit is bad, right? So wouldn't that motivate them to put Avatar state like constantly in very risky positions? You know, I'm starting to question the legitimacy of Avatar's lore and fantasy foundations. Do you think Dems can still win midterms? Absolutely. I absolutely think Dems can win. And the thing that's interesting is this doesn't affect their chances in the Senate whatsoever. Because a Senate election, there's 2 senators for the state. And there's actually a scenario where somebody could have 50% of the senators, but 0% of the congresspeople. 0% of the office that's actually supposed to be representative of the general population. But when it comes to the House, yeah, this negatively affects Democrats' chances. I think long-term when it comes to black voters and I'm going to be blunt with you, the destruction of their voting districts, as many of the attributes that make up the character of their community is disregarded in order to cut on partisan lines, which just so happens to heavily fall upon racial lines. I think that's going to have larger long-term impact than the midterm that's coming up. The midterm that's coming up is right around the corner. There will be effects from people gerrymandering this election. That is true. And it will cut negatively for Democrats by at least a few House seats. So it does hurt their chances. But Trump is such a fucking Neanderthal. Trump is such a knuckle dragger. He is mismanaging the war, which he now no longer calls a war, but he didn't want to call a war in the first place and never publicly called a war. Is now saying that the military operations have ceased, as missiles still fly. The way he conducts himself, if he doesn't get the energy situation under control, there is nothing he can do. He will lose the election. If he does not get the war under control, then he cannot get the energy situation under control, and therefore he cannot win an election. And that will not just affect the House, that will also go up to the Senate. Guess what? It'll probably affect state-level races as well. Not to mention, Democrats are more motivated than Republicans right now. They are. When you poll them, when you poll people who are guaranteed to go vote, they poll even harder for the Democrats than those who say they're going to vote X way or that way, just generally. So point is, even with this gerrymandering, Republicans still have a very difficult job ahead of them. But if this comes down to a race, which is not impossible and not terribly unlikely, where 1, 2, or 3 House seats could end up deciding it, then yeah, this gerrymandering could actually be what decides the control of the House rather than what the American people straight up want on a popular basis. Here is a news report that breaks down this recent decision. This happened as we were getting ready for stream. This was happening as I was trying to prepare for the show. So I don't have all the details, so we're going to listen to what CNN has to say. Plus, Todd Turner just died, so I got to give CNN a watch.
Just struck down a new congressional map that was passed by voters last month. Democrats have proposed a new map with the hopes of flipping 4 Republican-held House seats, and this is the latest battle in what's become this nationwide redistricting war. CNN's Arlette Saenz is here in the Situation Room, and Arlette, this is a big blow to Democrats.
Yeah, it really is. Democrats had been hoping to shore up their efforts to try to reclaim the majority, but this ruling from Virginia's state Supreme Court is a significant derailment of of those Democratic plans. Now, the Virginia State Supreme Court ruled...
Mind you, of course, courts aren't supposed to be viewed in a partisan manner, but this court is supposed to be viewed as a Democrat majority court. Throwing that out there.
Significant derailment of those Democratic plans. Now, the Virginia State Supreme Court ruled that the creation of this referendum that happened last month violated the state's constitution. Our team...
That's really cute of them to get around to it after the vote was already held and the state spent a bunch of money on it and voters got the vote. It's really nice of them to wait until everybody's already made up their mind, made a vote, afterwards to come in and say, oh, never mind. Remember that outcome? You know, why don't we just say no? Why didn't they do it beforehand? Why didn't they do it beforehand? And the worst part about this is some might say that this could be a good derailment. That if you do not want gerrymandering in this country because of the damage it does to our social fabric, the way that it tears us apart through making us pander to a more radical base while ignoring what the community as a whole, despite what your party base wants. I think that, you know, I think it's bad. I think it's awful. I think it'd be good to get off this train, but I don't think this is going to get us off the train. I think what this is going to do is not stop Florida from attempting to gerrymander. It's not going to reverse what has already taken place in Texas. And it is not going to stop other states from considering it. In fact, the messaging that is being sent right now is mixed. You could say that this could be a positive message against gerrymandering. Yeah, positive message against gerrymandering to who? A positive message against gerrymandering to those who are already against gerrymandering. Maybe a message against gerrymandering to some Democrats. And maybe even to some Republicans who say, oh, well, the courts are giving us an opportunity. Let's, maybe we should derail if you're one of those, the 1 to 2 surviving Indiana Republicans who voted against this redistricting effort, the mid-decade redistricting effort. When you looked at this, you could say, well, okay, so the Democrats can't catch up to us. Let's keep up building the lead. Let's keep expanding. That's Trump's philosophy. Trump was the one who wanted a gerrymandering war, who came out and said, you know, we need to pick up some seats so we can control the House. He's just openly like, look, it's not a question of do we run here and win? Do we run here and win? It's just a question of, can we balance out the system to keep me in power and keep my majorities that I need to not be obstructed by Congress, to not be checked by Congress, to not have the checks and balances, well, check and balance. So there could be the Trumpian, like after they spilled millions of dollars into Indiana to get those state senators elected out of, kicked out. That's one message for the Republican Party saying, listen to Trump, do what Trump says, don't get voted out. And then you look at this and you might say, well, that could be a counter pressure. It could also be something that says, look, the Democrats tried, they failed. We should not stop gerrymandering because they tried to gerrymander and they failed. We should keep gerrymandering because now they've got more barriers than we do. And as long as the courts in Florida uphold that they can do what they can do, which is a likely outcome, then they can continue to build upon their lead, because Maryland cannot pick up the seats that Virginia could. That Maryland could pick up maybe one. And so this gerrymandering war, however it looks to be balancing out in favor of Republicans. So whether or not Democrats take back the House, it will be more difficult for Democrats to take back the House due to this gerrymandering effort.
I'm still reading through this opinion, but this certainly will be a major setback for Democrats going forward. Democrats had drawn this map hoping to create an additional 4 seats for Democrats in next year's Congress. They had kind of sliced up the more Democratic suburban areas of the Washington, D.C. area to make these districts that pinwheeled out into more rural areas. But now, for the time being, this is prevented from going forward. This is made even more more complicated by the fact that we have seen so many Republican states swiftly moving over the last week to redraw their maps. We've seen Florida and Tennessee pass measures to try to draw their maps and gain more Republican seats. There are other efforts underway in Louisiana, Alabama, and South Carolina as well. And so that really can potentially shift the way that some of these House races are going to look heading into November. You know, Democrats are really hoping that they can reclaim the majority. They feel that they have a lot of the political, economic headwinds are working in their favor. But certainly this is a major setback in this redistricting race, as we've seen states across the country, Republican and Democrats, trying to redraw their congressional maps to more See,
this is also the problem with gerrymandering, is that a lot of these states have put in things in their constitution specifically to try to stop gerrymandering. They say gerrymandering's bad, gerrymandering's wrong. We're all moving in the direction of being more generally representative of our districts, where we want the districts to represent the character of the community, and we want districts to not be gerrymandered so we could have an actual democratic process, right? That is what a lot of states were slowly, very slowly, moving towards. Now that there's a race to the bottom, which is what we're at now, we're at a race to the bottom of how quickly can we make people's votes worthless, how quickly can we make it so that democracy is more a performance art than it is an action that you participate in, a process that you participate in when it comes to these districts. If you have it so Democrats are getting their court decisions saying you can't do it, while Texas goes forward, while Florida goes forward, while South Carolina and Tennessee go forward, those types of divisions will hypercharge the divide even further. It's already bad enough to be going towards a system where you just appeal to the strongest parts of your base in order to win a primary, where the general becomes just a kind of charade. It's already bad enough.
A curd is a curd.
Kaziem got a Tier 3 subscription. Democracy has been a performance art since hanging shads were hung.
I think that's an exaggeration. But I will say that sometimes democracy in this country has been performance art. Like, for example, the idea of somebody waiting to the last day to file and then having their top staffer be the only one that files as the current legislator resigns. Everybody involved in that process is a fucking bastard. And I mean that, and I would even go so far as to say that they should lose. Whether they lose to Republican, whether they lose to whoever, that they should lose on principle. Whether or not that's how it's going to balance out is besides the point. Whether or not, like, how that matches up to our current political reality, like the balance of power, is besides the point. On principle, there should be a primary. On principle, there should be a general. And if you have it, so some states you are allowed to gerrymander, other states you aren't, and that seems to balance out at the same time that the Voting Rights Act is gutted for black voters, what is that going to mean for the South? That's going to mean a lot less black representation. That's going to mean a lot less black voters voting as a collective community when it comes to like where these people live and trying to maintain the character of the community. Less of them are going to be able to participate. That means less Democratic representation in the South, more Republican seats gained in the South, and other states handcuffed by their Supreme Courts. And that divide of this state can take your vote away, or at least the function of your vote away. This state cannot. That will increase the divide only further from the partisan divides that are being, how do you put it? Pandered to by the structures, pandered to by us making it so that the primary is what matters and not the general. Combining that with, that's the system we've built, but also the system isn't consistent. And if you want to gerrymander you specifically, you can't. That's only going to piss off Democrats more. It's only going to divide the country more, because they're going to say, well, let's try to rig it. And if we can't rig it, they're still going to be able to. And then it makes people question like the purpose of the process itself. When people think that elections can be easily stolen. And all it takes is one political leader to declare it stolen and it's stolen. If you can gerrymander and feel perfectly fine about it, and it's not even like a social taboo, it's just the way politics is done now. If you have the Voting Rights Act gutted at the same time, and that functionally transforms into a hollowing out of the Congressional Black Caucus, like all these things at the same time seem to create an electoral pressure cooker, both for a system and what it means for the divides that we have, and just to add more tension into what is already going to be an extremely tense midterm. What is gerrymandering? How does it work? How do you guarantee yourself the right votes? You know what? Let me explain it as simply as possible. Let's say that you have Memphis, right? And let's say Memphis votes blue, and you don't like that, and you don't want that district to be blue. You would rather if you instead had a bunch of red districts. So what you do is, instead of, say, making the district over and around the city of Memphis, you make the city of Memphis into 3 separate districts. One takes a third of the city, which is going to be overwhelmingly Democratic, and then the rest of it will be in the countryside until 2/3 of them are of demographics that you would typically associate with your voter base. Then you repeat that process for the other 2/3 of the city, creating 3 Republican representatives out of what would usually be 2 Republican representatives and 1 Democrat. That's how it works. That's why I am of the belief that whether or not it means we have a whole, I understand the idea of a whole grid to the country. Just take a grid to the country and be done with it. Kind of get it out of the way. Say that, you can't say the system's biased, but I believe that the best way to do it is probably by trying to maintain the character of the community, including counties, including cities, including towns, including communities together when they get districted. That isn't enough necessarily to put a complete hole in gerrymandering, but making it so you cannot cut cities in half is helpful. Districts should represent an actual community, yes, or a conglomeration of communities, not a conglomeration of the voters that you wanted. Because if you can pick a conglomeration of the voters that you wanted, then you're only going to pick voters that are never going to disagree with you.
Acquire more seats in what's going to be a very close midterm election.
And you're seeing a difference in how some of the states are doing it. Like in Virginia, it was the voters, right, who voted for the redistricting. In other states, you're seeing the legislature take the reins and do it themselves, right?
And that's one thing the Democrats have tried to argue is different from what they are doing compared to what some of these.
Saying whether a country is a democracy is an oversimplification. The health of a democracy is just as important. Well, I mean, I don't think one gerrymandering kill or does not kill democracy. That my intention was not to say that democracy died today and is over. That's what somebody was taking from what I was saying. I see like the slow spiraling of our democracy's health. I see multiple things like changes to our electoral foundation, the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, this gerrymandering being allowed to run rampant, gerrymandering being selectively stopped when it comes to court decisions that from states that made the decision to have independent redistricting commissions. Just the general partisan language of our democracy
immoral,
right now.
Morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Thank you for the tier 1 sub. I appreciate that. Lures, I don't know how to pronounce it. Either way, I appreciate it. But yeah, like all of this, like I agree that it's like a general health for the democracy. And I would say right now, our democracy needs to have like a fucking caramel candy or it's gonna pass out on the floor.
Republican states have been doing. We saw California and Virginia come out with referendums where their voters had to decide if they actually wanted to move this forward. And this was a very close race that happened just a little over 2 weeks ago. I think that this passed by about 3 percentage points. So it's something that Virginia voters were very torn up about, but had decided to move forward with. But then we have seen more Republican-led states really turn and try to just do this through their state legislators, with Texas being the state that really kicked off this whole redistricting battle last summer.
It's a huge loss for Democrats who spent tens of millions of dollars persuading Virginia voters to approve the new map. And it comes one day after Tennessee's governor signed into law a new Republican gerrymander that breaks up the only majority black district in the state.
I mean, look at this. I mean, see, this is exactly what I was talking about. What is gerrymandering? That was a district. Memphis had its own district before. Now it's been turned into 3 districts where they split Memphis up 3 ways in order to make them all Republican. They're very blatant about the fact that it's partisan. Very blatant about the fact that it's partisan. I will say, though, they can't even keep their own story straight. The legislature said, the person who leads the Tennessee legislature said that they based this district off of census data. That the only data that they used to do this was census data. Now, mind you, they also said that they're doing this for completely partisan reasons. That the president told them to make it so that Republicans win the election, so that's what they're doing. It's as simple as that. They're making sure that Democrats cannot win. That's the goal of what they're doing. Now, if that's true, which is already bad on its own face, but if that's true, it's not like you collect census data on who is a Democrat. There's not a census question, are you a Democrat, are you a Republican? That's not a thing. And you don't use that in something like this. So how would you find out that the people of Memphis are not of the partisan divide that you want, and so therefore they have to be split in 3s? Could it be socioeconomic factors? Could it be things like race? I mean, I'm leaning a lot towards the latter.
Alabama and South Carolina may soon pass their own last-minute maps. So here's where that leaves the redistricting wars nationwide right now. Republicans have targeted 14 extra seats. Democrats could pick up 6. Theoretically, it would be an 8-seat GOP advantage. But here's an important caveat. Just because a seat is redrawn by Republicans or even Democrats doesn't mean it automatically goes that way, especially in a year like this one. I'm joined by a terrific group of reporters here at the table.
Okay, I don't need to listen to the reporters. I just wanted to hear the rundown. Look, what she's saying is true. There could be like a few of these districts that they redistricted. They could end up finding like, oh, we actually didn't make like good ties with these voters. Now that we got new voters, they actually don't approve of me. And there was a general shift in sentiment and judging election results based off of last election when a lot of the what these demographics think of the Trump presidency has changed, then can lead to some of these districts not flipping. Some of these districts actually going the other way. I find it hard to believe, though, that that's going to happen in the majority of these cases, and that this gerrymandering attempt isn't going to help the Republicans in some way. If you can make it so that it's 10% city and 90% rural, you are setting it up in a way where you're going to have to fail very, 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 very miserably in order to, like, really shake it off. Watching from Turkey, love the YouTube documentary vids. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Welcome, welcome.